Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Financial Times here's advisors to Donald Trump and Elon Musk are urging them to put aside their differences amid concerns that their feud could harm them both politically and commercially. The Mirror describes the two men as babies at war. The Star, meanwhile, reports that Mr. Musk will no longer allow NASA to use one of his SpaceX rockets to ferry astronauts to and from the International Space Station. The Times leads on Sir Keir Starmer's plan to give the NHS a £30 billion boost in next week's spending review to improve the performance of the health service, reporting concerns it will compromise the needs of other departments. The Daily Mail leads with an investigation into illegal DIY weight loss injections being sold online, posing serious health risks. The Express reports the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch's description of the UK's asylum system as being mugged by undeserving applicants. And the Telegraph leads with concerns that fears of migrants are being classified as a form of terrorism under new Prevent guidance. And we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Zoe Williams. Great to see you both. Well, let's start with the big split, the end of the bromance between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Interestingly, Donald Trump was flying to play golf, and he didn't give the impromptu press conference he often does when he's about to board a plane. But let's start with the front page of the Mirror. Zoe, you start us off on this. Babies at war. What have you made of the past 24 hours?
Well, so basically, the Mirror is taking a line which many commentators are taking in America as well as over here, which is that we're just looking at two babies or toddlers or, you know, unformed egos. And it is definitely true that you are looking at egos which haven't been kind of mediated into adulthood, into any kind of sensible version of how an adult behaves around his
Which
peers.
tweets stood out for you?
Well, what really stands out is that they're levelling extraordinary accusations at one another. You know, Musk's kind of intonation around Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein is incredibly problematic for both Trump and also Musk. You know, this isn't new news to him, so he knew that all the time he was supporting him. And it's incredibly undignified to watch. But what I find really dismaying as a member of the global public is that they are like 3-year-olds or maybe 7-year-olds, and yet we're having to analyse them as though they're reasonable adults. And I think it really does pollute everything. It pollutes all of our perception of current affairs, and it pollutes the way people talk to each other.
Benedict, I mean, they may be acting like babies according to the Mirror, but they're very powerful babies.
Yeah, I think that's probably they're both easily in the top 10 most powerful people in the world. So this is a pretty sizable split. It's a clash of personalities, two personalities who are not used to being told no or not getting their way, or when they are told no, being able to bulldoze their way through that kind of opposition. But it's also, they are, if you like, the figureheads of two different strands of republicanism, which were always going to end up clashing at some point as well. It's not just about the egos, it's also the ideologies. Donald Trump is somebody who wants to spend quite a fair bit of money because he wants to reward his base, he wants to bring industry back to the US, that's going to involve a lot of spending. Whereas, of course, Elon Musk has made his whole thing about trying to get rid of government waste, trying to shrink the size of the federal government. And when you have these two very different strands of right-wing populism and they sort of come together in this way, it was inevitable that actually this breakup didn't happen because of, you know, an argument over personality or anything like that. It happened because of a bill. It happened because of legislation. So that was always going to be the thing that actually hit the buffers. If they were both aligned on ideology, it's entirely possible that they could have carried on happily, indefinitely. But when it's actually a question of legislation being put forward, that is obviously where the breaks happen.
But they you know, to describe the big, beautiful bill as the kind of ideological execution of Trump's big plan is fanciful. He said himself that he was just responding to some amorphous sense that the voters didn't like what he was saying before, so now he was going to say something slightly different. Trump doesn't have any coherent kind of notion of what a big state or a small state or a responsible state or a good state looks like. He reacts kind of amoebically to whatever's on the plate in front of him.
I'd agree with that. He responds like the average modern American politician, which is to reward your voters, and that means spending money.
Well, let me just bring, before we continue, let's look at the FT Weekend front page there. They have an angle to this story, but that is that allies of both Trump and Musk are urging them basically to make up after the rift because of fears of the MAGA political agenda. And it's people like Ted Cruz and then various tech figures.
There are a number of worries in this piece. One of them is among a lot of Elon's investors. You know, he's not taking any calls, and even people who have billions invested in his companies aren't getting the kind of treatment they're used to from Elon Musk because he's having this very kind of public tantrum. At the same time, obviously, Trump's camp, and it's extraordinary to describe the President of the United States as having a camp against his major donors camp, but Trump's camp is very worried about, you know, it looks pretty assured that the bill is going to pass, but Elon Musk's explosion will have emboldened the anti-bill voices within the Republican Party, and that's going to loosen Trump's grip on the people he's trying to keep on side. So nobody benefits from this. It's not like Elon Musk is walking off into a sunset with an alternative agenda that he can easily prosecute. He's just walking off with a huge amount of resentment while Trump is kind of weakened and confused. That, I think, is why figures like Ted Cruz are asking them to kiss and make up. But the problem is they can't because they have no sense of decorum or deferred gratification.
Elon Musk is trying to reach out a little bit, though, hasn't he?
I think he's woken up the morning after his rant and realised he might have gone too far this time. Yes, I think he is, in his own way, trying to maybe reduce the tension slightly. I don't really know how much you can, and I think Donald Trump is probably not the sort of person who would respond particularly well to that. No. But no, that this is true. This has longer-term political ramifications. Trump is his own kind of edifice, but what actually is the MAGA movement? What is the Republican Party beyond Donald Trump? Everybody else, your Ted Cruz's, your J.D. Vances, are going to be sat there twiddling their thumbs going, this doesn't make us look particularly good, does it? And we're the ones that are going to be left with this mess in 4 years' time.
Yeah.
Let's just look at the front page of the Daily Star, because obviously the balance of power kind of like, you know, falls a little bit towards Donald Trump. You know, he is the president of the US.
Yeah.
But this story highlights how actually Elon Musk's SpaceX does have an impact. And so it's not that easy for Trump just to dismiss Elon Musk. Zoe?
Well, is it not that easy? I mean, obviously, Musk has SpaceX, and the contracts with the Pentagon are absolutely eye-watering. So there's no obvious replacement. There's no obvious way to replace this technology. But actually, Trump does have significant power, even greater power than a regular president, over all businesses of all kinds, and that is to do with the tariffs. You know, he can bring a sector or an individual within a sector or a company within a sector completely to rack and ruin just by making their life difficult with tariffs. And that was part of the point of the tariff policy in the first place.
I'm sure we'll talk about this again very, very soon. We're going to have to move on to some of the day's or tomorrow's other stories. If you look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Benedict, this to you. Fears over migrants are a form of terrorism. Now, this is something that was picked out of the Prevent program's website, which is about de-radicalization. And I guess their definition of cultural nationalism. What is this?
I mean, this is, as ever with the Prevent strategy, there's always slight concerns as to whether or not there's sort of overreach. This is about whether or not voicing concerns over migration, not specifically just migration, though other aspects that might be linked to it amongst younger people might be a sign of radicalisation. And I think it's important, you know, when you read that sort of fear of migrants as a form of terrorism, that's not, most people would not consider that extremism, but it's when you sort of get down into the details there and you can see topics like ethno-nationalism, white supremacism, that's more the sort of seen as, if you like, a gateway towards going off towards slightly more extreme things. That obviously is very concerning, but this is not couched in particularly helpful language when, if we're being honest, the big topic of conversation in the mainstream today is migration, and it is not the right. It is people who vote all sorts of parties are suddenly beginning to see this.
Speaking of language,
I'm actually very surprised at how strongly I agree with you. When you've got the Prime Minister saying we will become an island of strangers, you cannot then describe concerns over migration as terrorism unless you describe the Prime Minister as a terrorist.
Then we can refer him to Prevent right now, on air.
But the funny thing is that I spoke to somebody who knew a lot about Prevent. They weren't involved with it, but they'd done a lot of research into it. And they said, actually, a lot of the markers of radicalisation and the kind of material you read would be fulfilled by the Telegraph.
Well, but let's go to the Daily Express. Let's see what the leader of the Conservatives said in a speech earlier today. Britain being mugged in asylum claims mess again.
I mean, Kemi Badenoch is struggling for relevancy. That's being polite. The Conservatives have got this idea at the moment that if you were to solve the issue around migration and all the other ills, you need to address the European Convention on Human Rights, and that actually we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, there may be good arguments for that. I'm sure I could make lots of good arguments for it now. I don't, in fact, think that this is something that is at the forefront of the minds of the average voter. They're not in the mood for that kind of... Yeah, it's quite clear that this wants to be turned into a referendum. The public is not in the mood for that sort of thing. And also what we have not heard from any of these people that say, let's leave the ECHR is, OK, what are you going to replace it with? Because I don't think the public also trust the average Conservative MP to come up with something better.
That's the thing. Basically, migration is a carrier issue for anybody who wants to say, your life is terrible and I know how to fix it simply. And that's Nigel Farage's offer. You know, I can do a simple fix and your life will be better, you will be richer. But when Conservatives do it, after the amount of time they had in power, after the rises in migration that occurred under their watch, after the complete disconnect between their language, their promises and what actually happened, they just end up making fools of themselves and fools of us.
OK, we're just going to have to leave it there. Because coming up, Luke's father, who art Darth Vader. I know, we'll explain it, I promise. We'll look at one survey's startling comparison of Star Wars and the Lord's Prayer after the break.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits still.
We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Benedict Spence and Zoe Williams. Zoe, let's start with you. Let's look at the front page of The Times. And the headline there, squeeze on services to pump cash into the NHS. Now, obviously, it's the big spending review coming up next week. So the Prime Minister wants to push a lot of money into the NHS, thinks that that's what might change his fortunes in the coming election.
I think it does, actually. I mean, and I very rarely feel sorry for the Labour government at the moment, but I do feel sorry for them a little bit when I look at this spending review, because basically, probably 30 billion is the minimum the NHS needs to do all the things they promised in their manifesto, from, you know, reducing waiting times to reducing A&E crises to accessing dental care. Like, there's so much need in the health services that you can't not spend that money, let alone with a pay freeze having been in force for so long for public sector workers that doctors are, you know, always ready to go on strike, and I think rightly so. But it's not landing the way it as a kind of Blairite act of generosity, precisely because all the language coming ahead of it has been about cuts to disability benefits, cuts to carers benefits, measures which will make people's lives so much harder that waiting less time in A&E is not going to do it for them.
Because the whole point of the story, Benedict, is that the 30 billion to go into the NHS are obviously going to come from somewhere else.
Yeah, and the Times mentions things like policing, which, given that we were also talking about another issue, is criminality, it's law and order, it's prisons, it's things like that. So when you already have that many other public services that are under strain, that are not performing, and of course, the other thing that we're being told about is we're going to need more money for defence. Well, if you wanted a bigger example of a money pit than the NHS, the MOD is an absolute disaster.
I'd actually forgotten about defence.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. We do forget about defence until a war pops up, and then we go, oh, yes, oh, no, that's terrible. This is really bad. It's a disaster, but we're going to be pouring more money into this. And that's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy of all of this. All of these things need money. If you don't give them the money, they rise to the top of the issues that people are very unhappy with. And, again, sort of feel a bit sorry for them, because this is not their fault. They inherited this. But that's politics.
That is politics. Yeah, you fight to get elected. You're fighting to get elected to what you inherit, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that goes in the spending review. Mirror, page 7. Zoe, this to you, Crackdown. It's about pirate fire sticks, and you know all about them. I mean, not because you have you just happen to know a lot about them.
Let the record show that I don't even support a team. But I feel like the phrase dodgy fire stick went into my head as one whole portmanteau word, because as soon as a fire stick existed, a fire stick, of course, is the way to access legal streaming services which you pay for, like Netflix and Prime. There has been a way to get illegal services, like, you know, Premier League football games. You can get them off European apps. You can just sideload your Fire Stick with dodgy apps and get things for free, which otherwise would cost you a lot of money. I mean, we're sitting right in the heart of Sky. We know how much sport costs, right? So what I think is unusual about this story is that the maximum prison sentence under the new legislation, which hasn't yet gone through, would be 5 years. But, like, I know quite a lot of people I know have a fire stick, a dodgy fire stick. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
I'll show them this story.
Obviously, nobody I'm related to, but, like, quite a lot of people I know. Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is toppy. You know, you get less time in prison for arson.
I was going to say, it shows what the priorities of this country are. It's football. That's actually what we really care about.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I mean, I am not somebody. I've watched a lot of football, but I was not, in fact, aware of the existence of a dodgy fire stick.
Yeah, you say that, Benedict.
No, I'm really dull. I'm really dull. I let other people have the dodgy fire sticks, and then I listen and watch their reactions on Twitter in real time. That's how I follow football, and you can see it all happening in real time. But yeah, so there's a tip. Don't break the law. or stay on Twitter for your whole life. That's really
such a
hard to do.
wonky way to watch football. I'm sorry.
It's either that or pay for Sky Sports, which, as you pointed out, is a very pricey deal.
Sorry,
but
we didn't
well
mean
worth
to-
it.
Yeah, exactly. Great value for money. I just hasten to add. But on a final story, page 3 of the Times, the Lord's Prayer forces out Star Wars in quotes poll. So they had a poll about the most recognizable words, and perhaps surprisingly, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, maybe it is, the Lord's Prayer has come out on top. What was the competition?
Well, Benedict thinks that this wasn't a fair competition, right? Because everybody gets told the Lord's Prayer every day at school for their entire lives.
It's beaten into them, depending on the school you went to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem like
I feel like that about Star Wars. I feel like I've seen it way more often than I wanted to.
Presumably the phrase is what? May the Force be with you? What's the actual phrase?
I think it's definitely not give us this day our daily bread.
Yeah. No, I meant from Star Wars, obviously.
Yeah, it's May the Force be with you.
I think it's May the Force be with you, but I think it's I am your father as well.
Okay.
Like,
Yes, no, that's true.
The thing is...
but also people, that they can correctly identify Churchill quotes, Shakespeare quotes. You'll Never Walk Alone is not just a football anthem,
Yeah.
it comes from something else. So it's
And also
quite good.
Charles Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
I'm quite impressed by that.
Yeah, no, I suppose it's nice to know that it is not all just sort of pop culture references, that it's stuff that's...
Star Wars is quite pop culture.
I said not all pop culture references. I suppose Shakespeare was pop culture.
Yeah.
I suppose the Bible was as well at the time, when it was really getting popular, really getting off the ground.
Yeah, when people were really getting into it.
Yeah, it's all just pop culture in the end.
But it'd be interesting, like the people that chose the Lord's Prayer, do they just know the first sort of few words, or how many would
fewer people can pick up lines from the national anthem than they can the Lord's Prayer.
But once you know a bit of the Lord's Prayer, it kind of suggests itself, It's like once you're forgiving us our trespasses, you kind of think, well, OK, we may as well forgive those who trespass against us.
Fair enough.
OK.
Lead us not into temptation. Are you sure?
And on that note,
Great.
Zoe, Benedict, thank you both so much. I'll see you at the top of the hour. Thank you. And coming up next on Sky News at 11, hundreds of drones and missiles. Russia hits back for Ukraine's air base attack. I'll have more on that and all the day's other stories at the top of the hour.